This microphone, how it feels better. Okay. How many here have been to the Middle East? Middle Eastern country? Which country? Oh, good. United Arab, okay. Israel? Israel? Did you go to Egypt too? Okay. Did you go down Gaza or you flew? You flew. Israel. Okay. One of the things we always start by, whenever we want to share the gospel with Muslims, especially people from the Arab world, you need to know about the Arab-Israeli conflict. Number one. Number two, how we use that to share the gospel. What happens today, most people either use that and end up having a argument with the Muslim friend or building walls, or opposite thing, they avoid it. Whenever it comes to the Arab-Israeli issue, and it could be as simple as, do we call it Israel or do we call it Palestine? You know what I'm saying? Do we call it occupied Palestine or we call it the state of Israel? And sometimes we have that sentence in our conversation and we're scared, like, well, let's avoid it. That looks like a, touchy thing. And it depends. You might be talking to somebody who's an Arab, still calls it Israel, or somebody, an Arab will tell you, no, it's occupied Palestine. So how are we going to use that to share the gospel? So that's what I want to do this afternoon. If my computer turns on, unless it's dead. So serving in the Muslim world is it is imperative that we have an understanding of the Middle East crisis and how to approach this for the sake of ministering to our Muslim friends. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the history, and then we're going to look about how Arabs view these events and how Israelis view these events. Okay, my testimony is I hated Israelis and I hated Palestinians, but when I got saved, I started wanting to love the people, and I need to share with you both sides, especially what I know from it, from both sides. Because at the end of the day, I think once you understand where someone is coming from, you can be able to communicate in a healthy way. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's take some time and maybe collect the questions that we have. What are questions you have about the Arab-Israeli conflict? Any question, whatever questions you have. Usually this is a session that we give at our Sahara Challenge. So what kind of questions you have about the Arab-Israeli conflict? Sorry. Solution. Okay. The question is, what are the barriers to have? What are the barriers to have the two-state solution for the Middle East crisis? Which, by the way, George W. Bush is the first U.S. president to say he accepts the two-state solution. And George W. said something very important that most people avoid. He said, two states side by side peacefully. You can have two states side by side and they're fighting. Well, basically didn't solve any problem. He just created a state. So I think that was good of George W. Bush to say that. But before George W. Bush, there was no one talking about two-state solution. There was, the solution was not there. Okay, any other questions? Sir, you had your... Okay. Okay. So everybody's kind of talking about, all right. Any other questions?
I have a question. Someone texted asking, should Muslims detained at Guantanamo remain detained?
Mm-hmm.
Some claim to be falsely convicted and deny of rights to have a trial. How should this question target America be answered when asked that by a Muslim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. The question is, should the detainees be detained? Should they be charged a trial? Or not have a trial, or be allowed to have a trial? Okay. A very good question. Any other questions? Yes. Are we giving them weapons or they're buying it from us? We're giving? And okay. Which is a good question. Should we as a nation that believes in God and allows freedom of religion be able to, support one side over the other, because our weapons are very well designed and they use them to kill others in it. Okay. The next slide is going to show you a map. This is the Middle East. I usually like to start here on purpose because I want us everybody to see on the same page. Some of you here look like you've traveled and you're very well versed with this thing. So you could see Egypt, Sudan. You could see Saudi Arabia, Palestine, Israel is there, right there. Looks like a dagger in the middle of the whole thing. And Jordan looks like an axe, doesn't it? Lebanon looks like a handgun. So I don't know who designed these maps. But one of the things I want to share with you is when I came to America, one of the most frustrating things for me was Americans didn't know geography. Now, after living here for a while, I understand America's a big country, 50 states, I understand that. But it bothered me that when I tell people I'm from Lebanon, they would say, where's that? I'll say the Middle East. And they would say, where in the Middle East? I say, well, next to Turkey. They wouldn't know. Next to Egypt, they wouldn't know. I'll say, oh, next to Israel. Like, oh, yeah, I've heard of Israel. And I'll say, well, we're a little bit north of Israel. It's like saying to Americans, if you come to my country and you say, I'm from America, I say, where's that? And you say, well, it's a little bit north of Cuba. How do you feel? We don't like Cubans. We don't like the regime there. And as a Lebanese, we don't like the Israelis. We don't like the regime there. And so I was going around defining where I live by telling Americans, oh, well, I'm a little bit north of my enemies, the people I don't like. But this is the Middle East. This is the area we're in. All these maps were designed in 1912. So theoretically, some Muslims will argue that these maps were put on them by United Nations. Okay, what maps do you want to use? If you want to use those maps, what do you want to use? You want to use 18th century? What, the maps? You want to go, what, the Ottoman Turks? Do you want to go back to Saladin? The struggle today is that how far back you want to go? We can go all the way to the days of Jesus. We can go to the days of Moses. We can go to the King Solomon. King Solomon ruled from the Nile to the Euphrates. So if you don't accept a map, what do you want to accept? What is the conversation you want to have? The reason I'm putting this up is these maps were designed after the fall of the Ottoman Turks, one. Two, as after the fall of the German army, and the English and the French divided the Middle East into between them. So the French took Lebanon and Syria and then North Africa. The English took Egypt and Sudan and the Arabian Peninsula and Iraq. They discovered oil in 1931 in wells which is now considered, I think, Saudi Arabia. But my father's uncle, whose mom was English and dad Lebanese, drove the first drive from Beirut to Baghdad through the desert in a Ford T model. And it's kind of fun. It was like 1920s. But this is the problem here. 1948, the Jewish militia kind of do some terrorist attacks. They bombed the King David Hotel, and there was the Liberation War. And the next slide should give you a picture of Lebanon. But the Liberation War started the State of Israel in 1948. This is Lebanon. Lebanon, the mountains go up to 10,000 feet. So when you are in Lebanon, you're already geographically higher than many other neighboring countries. You're higher than Israel, you're higher than Syria, because the mountains keep going up, from the seashore up. And then the mountain is so huge. There are two mountain ranges that, where it says Beirut? Okay, that's good. You go up, it says Jubail, and then Al-Batroun. By the time you get to Al-Batroun, the mountain and the sea are one. The highway has to go through the mountain. They dug a tunnel in it. So it's a very mountainous country in Lebanon. Next slide. There was a war in 2006. And you remember, out of control. One of the problems for Israelis, anytime they fight in Lebanon, it's fighting uphill. The war with Hezbollah, all Hezbollah will do is they will hide these rockets and then they will shoot them in the air, in the southern direction. And the rocket will keep going till it runs out of fuel and it will fall. So they would shoot about 350 rockets a day during that war. It didn't do a lot of damage. I mean, it hurt some people, but mostly fell in farms. But the whole idea was a psychological warfare, that the prime minister of Israel cannot protect the airspace of Israel. And Israelis attacked from the south, and you always attack higher. You're attacking going uphill because the mountains are there. All the way up to the mountain of Cedar, which you can see a triangle in the middle of the country there with a Q next to it. That's Arnit Sauda. And that's at 3,000 meters. It's 3,300 meters above sea level, which is 10,000 feet above sea level. I took a team there in July. On July 3rd, there was still snow on the mountain. Most people think there's no snow in the Middle East, but come to our country. So, okay, now when you look at the map down there, you could see the green part is what they call Israel, and then the other part that's gray and green, that's called the West Bank, because it's the west bank of the river Jordan, and then you have Jordan, the country. Next slide, please. Okay, the reason I wanted to look at this one, because many times, as American country, you're a country that is 300 million. You have a strong economy compared to the rest of the world. You have a strong army compared to the rest of the world. For the last 200 years, you have been involved in major events, right? The last civil war you had on your country was 1860. So if you think of it, for at least 200 years, around 100, 150 years, you have not had a war on your soil. Okay? You're a country that has certain stability. For us, when it comes to the Middle East, these countries are small. We received our independence from the French in 1943. So in many ways, the people of Lebanon can trace their history to the days of the Phoenicians, but as a country of Lebanon, as a Republic of Lebanon, we're only since 43. That's not even 60 years, 70 years. So there's a lot of influence to us. So we get influence from Syria, from Jordan, from Iran, from Turkey, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from the United States, from Russia, because we're a small country. There's only 3 million Lebanese. Same thing in Syria. Syria is the size of Ohio. Iraq is the size of California. Iran is the size of Texas and California together. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is that for you, you feel like, well, why doesn't Lebanon make their own decision? I would love that. But it's a country the size of Connecticut. You know, after the war with Israel in 2006, the country lost $4 billion. In 34 days, the country lost $4 billion. Okay? So Israelis hit very hard, very hard. Right after the war was over, Iran sent Hassan Nasrallah $150 million in cash. He received in cash $150 million to take care of the Shiites' houses. In a country of 3 million and an economy that doesn't move, you bring $150 million cash. And the head of the, what do you call in America here, the Treasury Department, he came on TV, he was livid. He goes, it's the 21st century, how can you bring into the country $150 million without moving through the system of, you know, it's not in the banks or anything. It's flown in to give to Hassan Nasrallah to replenish his arsenal and take care of the Shiite homes that were bombed. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is that we many times think that these decisions are made objectively. They're not objectively. People get bribed, get paid, you know, there's influence on this, influence on that. On top of this, if I'm just talking about Lebanon, Lebanon has 35 different denominations. So if you're Sunni, you're not going to like Iran. Iran is a Shiite country. See what I'm saying? You're going to go towards Bahrain. You want to go, Qatar or Saudi Arabia. But if you are a Shia in Lebanon, you're not like Saudi Arabia because the regime in Saudi Arabia is Sunni. I'm not like the Iranians. Now Iraq, majority of Iraq is Shia, but they were ruled by Saddam, who's a Sunni. Majority of people in Syria are Sunni, but they're ruled by the Hafiz al-Assad family, which is now his son Bashar, and they're Alawite, and Alawite is a sect of Shi'ism. Now, you and I don't think this way. Number one, because we vote people according to their accomplishment. In some way, it could be a problem, but I like that. I want to vote someone who has done something, right? I don't want to vote somebody because they have the right last name. I want to vote somebody who's accomplished something. Well, when you come to the Middle East, that's not the case. Many times you vote to someone because they're in the same religion or you know their last name. They don't have to have accomplished anything. So it's very important. It's a very much important distinction. The next slide, please. There's a picture of a bomb during the war. And next one, please. You can see how the 2006 war. The thing about the war in Lebanon, there was a mixed feelings between the Lebanese. One, they were upset with the bombing of this Israeli because it was very vicious. But also they were upset that the Hezbollah group, what they did is they dug under the international border and attacked an Israeli patrol car, killed 2, kidnapped 2, injured 10. And when that news came out to Beirut, they were distributing baklava in Southside Beirut. I was in the States. I'm watching television from Lebanon on my internet. And the lady, short Lebanese reporter like this, she goes, Mr. Nasrallah, you dug under the international borders and attacked Israelis. Wouldn't that be considered an act of war? And his response, I was watching, his response was, we do not accept the international borders. These were put by Europeans, which is a problem for us as Lebanese, because once you say that, we lost any concept of security. And this morning, I told you, and yesterday, now the Syrian army flies their jets and bombs Lebanon in the north. So this is a problem for us, because if you say these borders are not respected, well, how can you keep any security? You know? So that's one of the struggles. They did not know this. Hezbollah thought that's it. They can trade 2 soldiers for, I think, 300 of their detainees. Instead, Israel went the opposite. Israel declared war and attacked. And I just want to tell you guys, in Israel today, right now in the Middle East, people keep talking there's no war. In 2006, the war never stopped. The Israeli army said they'll have a truce. They will stop operations because of United States, United Nations meeting with the Prime Minister of Lebanon. And I'll share that in a little bit, also the crisis we're in. But the danger for me as a Lebanese, we're still in war. It's just the Israelis are not attacking. The war was not over. Nobody signed a paper saying we lost and you won, and these are the concessions. There was nothing. They said we're stopping the operations. And that's what the scary part for me is, the operations can resume anytime. But the Prime Minister of Israel then said that every time a rocket falls in Israel, they will destroy 10 flats in Southside Beirut. Southside Beirut is heavily Shia, and Southside Beirut heavily supports Hassan Nasrallah. So you could see what they were doing. Next slide, please. Next one. See, make sure that he knows this is a bridge. When I was a teenager, one of my classmates, he's a Shia, I said, Israel will never fight longer than 10 days. And I said to him, why? He goes, because they will run out of ammunition. Israel bombed 34 days. My parents were there. They said at night they were bombing, and in the morning there were drones. My parents said it was a mess. So how do you bring a bridge? You don't need more than 2 rockets, one in the beginning and one in the end. The whole thing comes down. Next one. Look at this guy. He's trying to get out and get stuck. Okay. Now the other variable today is Kurdistan. The United States did a great job for the Iraqis. My brother-in-law is Iraqi. They were very happy when the Marines came in. But when the Marines came in, they helped a group called the Kurds. Well, where's Kurdistan? Okay. Where's Kurdistan? Well, Kurdistan is Central Asia. The Kurds are not Arabs. They're not from the Middle East. They came with Saladin to defeat the Crusades. And Saladin discovered that those Christians are sitting in Jerusalem, in the land, they don't have a lot of rivers. He wants water. So he found out that the water is up there, up north. So after they defeated Saladin in 1187, he kicked out the Crusaders. He left Jerusalem, moved, and this is how he chiseled his empire. Look at his empire. That's Kurdistan. It's owned now by Iran, Iraq, parts of Syria, parts of Turkey. So if the Kurdish people want their Kurdistan back, how many countries they're going to have to break down? So welcome to the Middle East. That's another mix in this fire, which is ethnic. The Kurds are Sunni, but they don't like the Arabs, and they don't like the Turks. If you want to insult an Arab, you call him a Kurd. If you want to insult a Kurd, you call him an Arab or a Turk, and vice versa. So you're adding to the mix here. The reason it's important to understand the Middle East crisis, it's not about religion only. It's not about Jew and Arab, but it is Kurds and Turks, Sunni, Shia, Alawites. And then added to that, moderates, militants, usuliyin. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do, I'm going to run through this quickly, show the Arab view and the Jewish view, and talk a little bit about how we can use this to share the gospel. And I'll answer the questions, because for me, there is a deeper variable that's going on. You know, should we give arms to Israel? As a Christian, nobody gets arms. Nobody should get arms. As an American, yeah, you're doing a business, selling it here, because America sells to Saudi. We sell to Kuwait. We sell to Qatar. About 15, almost 18 years ago, Qatar is one of the smallest countries in the Middle East. It's an island. Built the largest airstrip. And then they donated it to the United States Air Force. They said, you can move your base from Saudi Arabia to Qatar and use this beautiful airstrip free. So United States said yes. United States said, okay, we'll move. So they were interviewing the foreign minister of Qatar. And they said to him, why did you guys do this? This is how he answered in Arabic. He says, we live in a neighborhood with a lot of dogs. We wanted the big dog to be with us. Qatar is between Saudi Arabia, Oman, Iran, Iraq. They're in the Arabian Gulf. It's a very small country. They struck a new well about 4 years ago, and the well doesn't have oil, has natural gas. Guess how much natural gas they have? They have natural gas to sell for the next 146 years. Each one of us sends $1,200 a year straight to the Arabian Gulf because we pump gas in our cars. So John McCain said the largest exchange of wealth. He's right. Go on Google, type U.S. oil consumption. You pull a number of barrels, multiply it by $50, although the barrel have hit more than 100, and you can see how much money we spend just on getting fuel from the Middle East. So when you got the Arab-Israeli conflict, the first major event, 1948, the Liberation War, for the Israeli view, we have a state. Remember now when the Israeli army swears, whenever the cadets go through the training, and now they're soldiers, they take them to Masada. Masada is a hill in the north where Masada fell to the Romans, but the Romans, when they surrounded it, by the time they got there, all the Jewish people had killed themselves because they did not want the pagans to win. So they go there, they take their weapons, and they say, Masada will never fall again. So there's this oath that we want to have our land, we want to protect the Jewish people. Added to that, you have to remember in their background something called the Holocaust. Every Jew thinks the Holocaust. Because not only the number of people killed, but that they were killed systematically in the regime, nobody knew. I mean, by the time they destroyed Hitler, he had killed so many people. Not only Jewish, he killed Polish people too. So we're going to be honest. Yeah, there were Jews and Polish people, but to say Jewish people were not killed, come on. To say only Jewish people killed, also that's not true. There are others killed by Hitler. But that's their back. So their idea is we need our homeland back. So the Arabs say, no, they should not come back. They're from Europe. Okay? The Arab view is that an Israeli occupation. So I was talking to an American woman in Phoenix, Arizona. She said to me, why the Palestinians are upset? Let them go home. I said, where is home? She goes, Saudi Arabia. They're not Saudi. They're Palestinian. You know what I'm saying? You know, so the struggle today is we misunderstand the view on both sides. So there's two questions. Should the Palestinians leave the land? Second question, should the Israelis come to the land? The way you answer those questions, should they leave, where will they go? They're Palestinians, that's their land. If you say the Israelis should not come home, well, that they're Jewish, that's their homeland. It's like my son saying to me, I want to go live in Lebanon, and people tell him, no, you can't go to Lebanon because you were born in America. Well, why not? His father's Lebanese, his grandfather's Lebanese, why can't he go live back in Lebanon? So this is the question we have to answer. 1967, the Six-Day War, basically it's the 6-hour war, really. And in some ways it's true, America and Germany and the West had given good weapons to Israel. But also in a sense, it was bad planning on the Arabs. The Six-Day War, they said that in 6 days, basically they said we're going to have the war, kick out the Israelis in the sea. The Air Force was with the Egyptians, and the foot soldiers mostly were in Sinai, on the Jordan-Israeli border, and in the Golan Heights with Syria. Lebanon entered the Six-Day War. I was 6 years old, helping my dad put paper on the windows from the Israeli jets flying over Beirut. So we cover the windows from the light coming out. We didn't have to turn a lot of lights. The reason it's called 6-hour war because the Israeli army jets attacked the Air Force of Egypt in the morning. So the first strike was Israeli, not Arab. The Arabs were going to declare war, and they hit first. And they bombed the airport with the jets still parked, like what do you call, on the ground. So the story says that the pilots, the Egyptian pilots, are running to get to the airport, and they're watching their plane burning on the runway. So basically, there was no Air Force to give protection. So the Egyptian lost Sinai, the West Bank, and parts of the Golan Heights. And then in 1973, Yom Kippur War, they took the whole Golan Heights, and the Arab view is defeat of the Assyrian army. I was a teenager then. They shot a MiG-21 over Beirut. The dogfight between the Israelis and the Syrians happens over Lebanon. Because the Israelis, when they fight, they want to fight going west. So if they get shot, they eject over the sea. And then the Israeli Navy will pick them up. So all the dogfights over us, 210 Syrian planes were shot down. 210 Syrian planes were shot down. They shot the MiG-21. And I was a kid on the balcony seeing it burn. And that was Yom Kippur War. The key thing about it is they wanted to start the war when Israelis have a celebration. They said the Jewish people won't fight when it's a holy day. That's what bothers me about the Arabs. We have these weird stuff. Anyway. So the defeat of the Syrian army. In 1982, Israel this time invades because the PLO, this is what the Palestinians will do. They go to South Lebanon and they put these rockets. And remember, we're higher. So they'll put a timer and the rocket will shoot down to Israel. Okay? But the farm is not a Palestinian farm. The farm is a Lebanese farm. It could be owned by a Christian Lebanese, Shia Lebanese, Sunni Lebanese. Well, they're not there. The Israelis, they're as vicious as you say. The Israelis will figure out where it came. So they fly and they bomb the farm. So a lot of farmers were mad because they're saying to the Palestinians, you want to pick a fight, at least stay and pick a fight. Don't leave because we're the ones who are getting the beating. So in 1982, Israel comes all the way, invades Lebanon, all the way to the Beirut. They kept saying they won't take Beirut. They took Beirut. I was there after the war was over. And it was everywhere. There were Hebrew words everywhere because they want to make sure that the army doesn't get lost. So they destroyed the PLO completely. They just whipped them. Basically, the Syrian army finished the PLO completely in the north. But and that was the invasion of Lebanon. My brother told me this story, and the reason I'm sharing this with you is there was a man that you'd see in Lebanon over 3 years who sits on the corner like a hobo. He has a hat, has clothes, dirty, smelly clothes. He sits by the trash. Usually has a couple of dogs around him feeding him. The Israeli army arrives. This hobo gets in a tank, comes out with a 3-star suit. He was there as a spy. He knew everywhere. The head of security of Yasser Arafat was killed 2 blocks from my house. We were sitting in the house in the whole explosion. It was a VW bug. They booby-trapped it, and he was driving, and the Mossad killed him. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is the idea that, that everybody's having fun, and this is just a couple of things that happen. No, it's every day. Every day. It's one, for the other, to and fro. 1985, Battle of Tripoli, Syrian army destroys the PLO, and the PLO leaves completely. In 1988, the Intifada is a revolution between Arabs and Jews, but basically the Arabs of the land or West Bank, they decided they want to do their own leadership and revolt without having to depend on the PLO, which was outside Israel. 1990, the Gulf War, and the reason I put this, the Israeli view, they feel, he hit us 2 Scuds, they were scared from Saddam, we defeat him. The Arab view is that, see those Saudis, they are now with America trying to hurt Saddam because Saddam wanted to attack Israel. 1993, the peace process, land in exchange for peace. And the Arab view, they're not happy with that. They don't want to give land for peace. 2000, Israel leaves Lebanon. Israelis look at it as peace negotiation, but look at the Arab view. This is very important. What's the word there? Terrorism was victorious. Now, sure, Israel pulled on their own timetable, but in the mind of people, terrorism works. That's why it continued. It's the year 2000. What happens in 2001? What happens in 2002? What happens in 2003? We've never stopped because terrorism in their mind works. I can force you to do something by terrorizing you. Next slide, please. Okay. How we're going to deal with those tough questions, Arab-Israeli. They ask you, should we give weapons to Israel? I always say, Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. No, we don't want weapons to any country. Sure, we want people to protect themselves. Yes, absolutely. We're not saying it's easy, but as a Christian, I don't want to have anyone to have weapons. I don't want the Palestinians to have weapons. I don't want the Israelis to have weapons. I want people to have peace. Okay? Now, when you talk about politics and governments, now that's a different discussion. The discussion is, you guys need to protect yourself. In America, you need to protect yourself too. Every country should have its soldiers. Every country should have police. Why? If you don't have police, what happens? See, the evil people will rule. We don't want that. The reason America functions, not only because there are good people, but functions because there are police that stops. Remember the guy, David Koresh, down in Texas? You can't have your own militia. This is America. You can't build your own group against the government. No, there's police. You're upset with your neighbor, you call the police. You want to sue somebody, you sue somebody. So there's a structure. So we want structure. We're not behind selling weapons. We are behind order and structure. The other question was asked. 2-state solution, right? Before we get that, anytime you bring that up, you would say, if there was 2-state solution, would this solve the problem? If we have a 2-state solution, would the Palestinians and the Israelis not fight anymore? What do you think? How many say, yes, we'll stop fighting? They'll fight over Jerusalem. Thank you. The reason I'm pushing the issue here because I think the problem today is not politics. Look at America. We fought each other over a lot of stuff. Slavery, skin color, right? You look at Europe. They fought Catholics, Protestant, right? Muslim, Christian. The problem, we can always pick something to fight. The problem is a hard thing. Will a Jewish person forgive an Arab? Will an Arab forgive a Jewish person? That's the solution. Not this, you can give me the state, and then I'll say, oh, yesterday you lobbed the rocket, I'm going to lob a rocket. So we're back to, so the 2-state solution will work if they want to live side by side If they want to live side by side, live together, I don't think they want to live together, even side by side. They can stand each other. And they have to live peacefully. Because you give them 2 states, and please, you can fight with your neighbor without having guns. There's sticks and stones, and I can go trash his water. And if he has a farm, I can go, dump stuff in his farm. So fighting is not only weapons. It could be the way we treat each other. And I think that's the real core problem in the Middle East. They don't like each other. Jews and Arabs don't like each other. And Arabs don't like each other. And Arabs and Kurds don't like each other. And Turks and Arabs don't like each other. And the Sunnis and the Shiites. So I hope I'm explaining to you that the core problem is not going to happen just because we said so. The worst attack, the worst chemical attack in 100 years. United Nations meets and they say we're going to ask President Assad to give us the chemical weapons. And I can't believe my ears. One, why is he going to give them to us? Because we asked him? I mean, are you serious? Are you serious? He's going to give us his weapons because we asked? They just announced 2 days ago, go on CNN, they announced that Syria is not giving all their weapons. Okay, let's say we take the chemical weapons from them. Will that stop the war? So again, we're finding out that the real issue is not weapons and race and religion. The real issue is sin. They hate each other. So you take my chemical weapons, I'm throwing bombs at them. You take my bombs, I'll use something else. And so how do we deal with the question when they ask you, what do you think about the Arab-Israeli? Or I'm sitting with my Muslim friend, he says, what do you think, man? I don't know. It's not going to work out, these 2-state solution. I'll push the issue, I would say, so if we have 2 states, you think that'll be over? Yeah, maybe, and say, well, what's going on in Iraq? What's going on in other countries? The problem is sin. Always show that you understand the history. You want to mention some stuff good, if you've done some reading, good. If you're interested in reading about the Arab-Israeli conflict, there's a lot of things you can read on the web. I would recommend you read something a little bit like from Beirut to Jerusalem by Friedman. That's a good book. 90% of it is good. I'd like to meet him. He's got some. I tell him, hey, you made a mistake here. I was there when they bombed the place. But the idea is, it's a very good book to read from Beirut to Jerusalem. Wonderful understanding. Friedman does a great job understanding the way people think in the Middle East. He's very articulate in that. So read that book. Anything you want to read on in 1990 will help you. The 80s might help you a little bit about how these things forming. We're moving now with the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring is bringing a lot of new variables, like Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. Libya is out of the equation. Gaddafi sent a lot of money for weapons. Now he's dead. So Libya is out of the equation completely. I think Libya is going into a civil war unless they stop it. Then express compassion, highlighting this. We are not pro-Jewish, anti-Arab, and we're not pro-Arab, anti-Jewish. God loves both Jews and Arabs. We should compassion both. When an Arab kid dies and when a Jewish kid dies, God's heart is not happy. We're not happy. We are the people of God. So express compassion and then focus that the idea in the last 64 years was to kick somebody out. I was in Detroit airport on my way to Beirut. And I'm sitting, waiting, and this guy comes sit next to me. I'm here, he's there. He looked Arab, said, Salaam alaikum. I said, wa alaikum salam. He was Palestinian. So as usual, we're going to talk politics. I said, hey, what's going on? We're talking. And then he looks at me, he goes, we're going to kick the Jews in the sea. I said to him, well, that was the plan in 48. He goes, what? What are you talking about? I said, well, since 48, an Arab kills a Jew kills an Arab. We haven't solved the problem. So he goes, what's your solution? I said to him, we should follow what Jesus says. He said, what did Prophet Jesus say? I said, Prophet Jesus says, do unto others what you want them to do unto you. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. So he looks at me and goes, we'll never forgive them. And he walked. He got off, went somewhere else. The reason I'm sharing this with you is I'm sharing with him the truth. So they kick the Jewish people in the sea. Well, they'll come back and do it over and over again. They want to stay. They want their homeland. So the idea to say, we're going to kill them all, well, they can think the same way. We're going to kill you all. So the solution is to reconciliation. The solution is to do unto others what you want to do unto you. In 3 weeks, I'm going to be in the land of Israel. I'm going to go to a conference called Christ at the Checkpoint, where we pray for Jewish people and pray for Palestinian people. Wouldn't that be great? We're going to be peacemakers. We don't want weapons. Sure, politics can change. You can do whatever you want. But whenever you're talking one-on-one, always show that the idea that one person is going to kill the other is not working. If they bring weapons, the others are bringing weapons. If they do terrorist attacks, the other ones will bomb. You know what I'm saying? So that is not the solution. The next slide is read for them Matthew 26:52. I love to let them read it in the Bible, in Arabic. And then the next slide, please. James 4:1-2. It clearly says that the war starts in the heart. Next one, please. Next slide. And then it says that it's a heart issue, not a land issue. And that Jesus can change the heart. I was speaking in Indianapolis, Indiana, and the conference was at the Hyatt Regency there. So I'm using my microphone. It wasn't working before everybody shows up. So the lady helping me said, wait a second. She picks up her walkie-talkie, and she goes, Abdul, where are you? I'm like, Abdul, hey, that's my cousin. Let's wait. So Abdul shows up. He's from Morocco. So we start talking Arabic, Assalamu alaikum, start talking. He looks at me, he goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm here to speak about how to build bridges between Christians and Muslims. So he says to me, we are the same religion. I don't know if Muslims agree with him. So I bypassed, I said to him, and Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. He said to me, oh, Prophet Muhammad said that. I said, Prophet Muhammad said that? He said, yes, Muhammad said, if you buy a leg of lamb and your neighbor is too poor to have lamb, wrap the lamb with paper so your neighbor won't see the meat and gets jealous. Okay, I don't know how close it is, but that's fine. I said, well, that's nice, but Jesus says, love your enemies. So he's fixing my microphone and he goes, Jesus said, love your enemies? I said, yes, I had the Arabic Bible. I opened to Matthew where Jesus says, put your sword back. Whoever lives by the sword, die by the sword. So he leads in Arabic. He goes, can I take the Bible? I said, sure. He's been in America for 6 years. He's never seen a page. I used this thing, the conflict, the war, to show him that Jesus is different. Now, I don't know what happened with the Bible. I'm doing my sewing, as you see, you say in English. But the idea is I'm pushing that this is a heart issue. It's a heart issue. Now, you know who's going to get upset when you say that? Arabs going to get upset. Who else is going to get upset? Jewish people are going to get upset. Muslims are going to get upset. But we are the people of Jesus, right? Jesus was standing in front of the Sanhedrin. That's in the movie, The Passion. It's beautiful. The beautiful text says, the high priest asks Jesus a question, and Jesus answers, and somebody hits Jesus. Do you know what our Lord says? He says, if I'm telling the truth, then you follow the truth. If I'm not telling the truth, show me the falsehood. Why are you hitting? What Jesus is saying, violence is a result when you cannot answer the question of truth. So people get upset, but you still have to tell the truth. After September 11, I wrote an article on Islamic terrorism, and this is what I wrote in the article. In the last 1400 years, more Muslims have died on the hands of other Muslims than anyone else. Historically, Muslims have killed each other. So I get a call from the Indianapolis Star, from the religious office, religion department. So I pick up, the guy says, Mr. Masri, I said, yes. He goes, we looked at your website. In your article on Islamic terrorism, you say that more Muslims have died on the hands of other Muslims than anyone else. I said, that's true. He goes, well, you need to change it. I said, why? He goes, because it's offensive. And I said, I'm sorry? He goes, well, it's offensive. I said, sir, Yeah, but that's a history. It's a fact. He goes, yeah, but some Muslims get offended. I said to him, sir, the United States of America walked on the moon before the Russians. I am sure the Russians got offended. But it's a historical fact that we walked before them on the moon. You can't change history. And the struggle today is many times we feel like, well, I don't want to offend my Jewish friend. Oh, I don't want to offend my Muslim friend. But without telling the truth is we are all sinners who need a Savior. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your religion. You know, so it's important to us. How do we answer the question? First, you show that you understand the situation. If you don't want to go back to 82, fine. You can talk a little bit about what George W. is doing, what right now Kerry is doing. You can say, yeah, I understand these people are not happy. The settlements, that's an issue. You know, should we settle in someone else's land? That is a problem. But the issue at the end of the day is not whether you put a house or not. You can put a house, but then shoot your neighbor. Well, how's that going to help us? You know, the issue is a hard issue. Next slide. It shows you talk about the history, discuss any questions, and then show that Jesus can save. Now for us here right now, Matthew 24:14 says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the nations as a testimony for them, then the end will come. I was a young believer, who had a missionary. She was so pro-Israel. This is what she said to me. I was a young kid. She goes, if you love Jesus, you should send money to Israel. So I said to her, but they might buy weapons and shoot people. She said, it's okay. Israel is God's timetable. So I went home to study my Bible and I read chapter 24, verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the nations. Then the end will come. The timetable is evangelism, not politics. Not politics. There were people in Kosovo, for many years, they were not hearing the gospel. Right? And something happens, and we heard today from Durat. People started coming in. There were people in the Soviet Union not hearing the gospel. And then collapsed. So now there are churches in Ukraine, in Belarus, in Russia, in Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. One of the largest churches in Kazakhstan, the pastor was a Korean. You know why? Because Stalin moved Koreans and put them in Kazakhstan. So a lot of Koreans were born in Kazakhstan. So a Kazakh had an affinity to a Korean. So when the Soviet Union collapsed and white American missionaries will go, they looked at them and they thought they were Russian. But when the South Koreans came, they thought they were Kazakh, because the Kazakh grew among the Koreans. So the Korean missionaries were more effective because the Kazakh people considered them one of us. See what I'm saying? And the reason I'm sharing this with you is that God's timetable is evangelism. Yes, I believe God has a plan for Israel. Yes, I believe God has a plan for the United States. I believe God has a plan for Lebanon. I believe God has a plan for every people group. And if you look at our history, every people group at some point in history had a good presence. The Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, right? And what did they do with that power that God allowed them to have? Right now, United States is in the lead. How are we going to use our resources? How are we going to use our resources to spread the kingdom of Jesus? All right, let's take 5 minutes of questions. That good? Okay, if you have any questions, please. My approach is we use politics to go to the spiritual issue, use the spiritual issue to go to Jesus, and then show them that Jesus is a solution because He's working, Matthew 24:14, that everybody will hear the gospel. Yeah, objective. Welcome to the Middle East. There was a book called History of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. It's written I think it's 1999. But History of the Arab-Israeli Conflict. It's a thick book. That's a good one. There was another person who wrote on the war in Lebanon. I really don't like him because he's very biased in his writing, but it would be good if you read it to see, you understand where they're coming. And his last name is Saliba, Saliba. The reason I don't like the bias is that, see, when there is a conflict, there's never 100% in one person, even if it's 595. So when I come and say, it's all your fault, that's not true. Maybe there was something on my part. Either I misunderstood you, or maybe I said something that triggered something. So I need to own my part, sure. And this guy, when he writes, he doesn't own. It's always they. So that's why. But he wrote one on the Lebanese war, I think 1975 to 1980 is the. So that will help you. There is a book that's kind of a little bit dangerous called The Rise and Fall of the House of Saud. Saud is Saud. The Rise and Fall of the House of Saud. It came out 2004. Sorry, I'm coming from memory. I think 2004. But The Rise and Fall of the House of Saud. There's another book called History of the Arab People. It's a nice book. It gives you a little bit a flavor on how the Arabs view themselves. You have to remember that the Arabs came out of the desert and they had their own empire. So they're always thinking of their empire, which was, 700 and 800 AD. So they're always thinking 1200 years ago. The guy's name is Hourani, Hourani. You probably heard his name. Hourani lived next to my house, and I met him, but I didn't know that was Mr. I met him as Mr. Hourani, but I didn't know it was the same guy. A nice older man. I was a young teenager. Would go to the library, and he was there one day with somebody introduced us. But it's a nice book. He talks about the history of the Arabs and how they view themselves. Now with the technology and media, there's a lot you could see on YouTube also. It's kind of fun. Question? Yes, we have a training, how to witness to Muslims in Houston, Texas. You can join us if you like. Sorry, I'm from Lebanon. We're just good salesmen. We can sell sand to a Saudi anytime. Yes, we have also, if you go on bridgesstudy.com, we have a Bridges DVD study. Also, crescentproject.tv, you can do the training online. But the major difference is in when Muhammad died in 632 AD, he died with abdominal pains and high fever, which means there was an infection. At his deathbed, he said, Al-aqrabu minni yakhlifuni. The closest to me succeeds me. That's the story they tell. Now, we can't verify it, but that's what they say. So in Arabic, the word aqrabu means the closest, can be by blood or by distance. So the closest to him by blood was his first cousin, Ali. Ali was his first cousin, and he was fighting in the northern Arabian Peninsula. So he came back and said, well, I need to succeed the Prophet, because Allah speaks to the Prophet, and the Prophet leads the people. Well, the Prophet is dead. Who's going to talk to people? So they called Al-Khalifa. Khalifa means the successor. Khalifat al-Rasul, the successor of the messenger. So there was a dispute. The Muslim community decided, well, let's solve the dispute later. Let's have someone else lead. So they used the word mubaya'ah. Mubaya'ah means like not casting a vote. It's more like, I support you. So they all agreed on the best friend of Muhammad. His name is Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was the first convert to Islam. When Abu Bakr took over, the Arabs started leaving Islam. So Abu Bakr spent 2 years reconverting the tribes. Any tribe who left Islam, they attacked it, and they said, if you believe in God, God is alive. If you believe in Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. Come back to Islam or you die. So he reconverted the Arab tribes. It's called the Ridda Wars. You don't hear about it much. The Arabs like to avoid that because it shows that the Arabian Peninsula was Islamicized again after Muhammad. Abu Bakr dies of old age. Omar says it's time to take the army out. So the army goes to Egypt, Syria. They sack all these countries. They get to the edge of Libya to get to the edge of Iran. Omar gets assassinated while he's doing prayer. They kill him while he's praying. The second caliph after him, that's number 3 now, his name is Uthman. Uthman leads the army all the way to Spain, all the way to the edge of India, collects the Quran, and then he gets killed while he's doing salat also, while he's praying. After Uthman got killed, Ali has been waiting, right? He said, you guys didn't solve the problem. I need to take the leadership now. That creates a war. Those who support a guy called Muawiyah become the Sunni, which means Sunnah means path. Okay? So they say we want to follow Muhammad's path. Exactly. If Muhammad grew his beard, we'll grow our beard like Muhammad. So Islam today has detailed instruction from how to use a toothpick to how to have sex with your wife. They all bring that out of the traditions of Muhammad. Okay, I'm saying? So they tell you Muhammad entered the tub with his right foot in, you enter the tub with your right foot in. Okay, so the Sunni is a path. The Shia, the word Shia means followers. So those who wanted to follow Ali called themselves Shi'at Ali, which means we want Ali to be the caliph. That split started a war in 656. Who lost the war? Ali. They killed his 2 sons, Hassan and Hussein. Hassan and Hussein, their mom is Fatima, who's the daughter of Muhammad. We're a patriarchal society. So as a patriarchal society, I cannot marry my first cousin. I cannot. Because that's like incest. Because my first cousin is like my sister. Because the fathers are brothers. So I can marry from my mom's side. So here's Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, marrying the first cousin of Muhammad, having 2 children, so these are holy. They killed Hassan and Hussein. So every year on the 10th of Muharram, Shia, followers of Ali, they mourn that Ali was killed and Hassan and Hussein are killed. They scourge themselves, they beat themselves. They have this, if you want to think, catharsis. They're saying, oh, I wish I was born before to protect Ali, to defend Hassan and Hussein. Okay, Hussein was killed, I think he was 12 years old. So it's for them, it's a disaster. Okay, the Shiite branch uses the black color. Why? Because in battle, Muhammad's flag was, Ali's flag was black. The Sunni uses white colors. That's tendency. I mean, they can change, like, because Sunni Islam grew, went all the way to Europe, Africa, Indonesia. 90% of Muslims are Sunni. 10% are Shiite, but the Shiites are concentrated in Iran, parts of Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Lebanon. So that's where the Shiites are, most of them concentrated. Shia will say that they should follow the Imam, and in Shia Islam, Imam means the first. But this means it's someone who must be related to the Prophet, and he's guided, spiritually guided. Only God tells him. So if I have a question, I go to my Imam. In Sunni Islam, an Imam is someone who leads prayer or leads in the mosque. There's nothing necessarily, like he's no different than another Imam or another person other than he knows more about Islam. Sunni Islam can be fanatic and Shia Islam can be fanatic. In the past, Shia Islam was more progressive because the Imam can reinterpret the Quran to fit today, while in Sunni Islam, you cannot reinterpret life higher than the Quran. I cannot outthink the Quran. So Sunni Islam continuously kind of goes towards the back. But Ayatollah Khomeini made a mess for Shia. In 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini said that the best way to practice Islam is the days of Muhammad. See? So now we're no longer looking forward, we're looking backward. See the struggle? So in Islam right now in Iran, you're allowed to have something called pleasure marriage or sighe. Sighe means a permission. And pleasure marriage is when a Muslim man can marry a Muslim woman for a set period of time. 2 hours, 3 hours, 2 days, 3 days. And you don't need a special imam. All you have to do is say, I marry you, and you do the Fatiha, and then you divorce her. Once you divorce her, you're not responsible. Now, divorce in Islam is this. A man will tell his wife, you're divorced 3 times. Once you tell her she's divorced 3 times, you're divorced. And so that's the struggle today in Iran. In Lebanon, it's been practiced. There's a mess. Because basically it's legalized prostitution. All you have to do is tell someone, I want to marry you. They did a study on 3 campuses in Beirut and asked Shia students if they've practiced a pleasure marriage. And one guy was 21, had 18 pleasure marriages. One said that you have to give a gift at the wedding. One gave him a Quran, which, look how cheap he was. He went to the mosque, got a free Quran, gave it to the girl as a gift, and basically had sexual relation with her. So that's a struggle in Shia Islam. Sunni Islam says you cannot practice it, although Muhammad practiced it, but they say it's only for the days of Muhammad. It doesn't apply today. The Shiites say if it applied in the days of Muhammad, it must apply today too. See, Islam will fall if you give it a historical box. Give you an example. When you and I read Joshua, it's not the same like we read Matthew. When we read Matthew, it's not the same like we read the Psalms. Yes, it's still the Word of God. God speaks to us. But when we look at it, it has a historical box. I don't read Joshua to know how to throw the spear. No, I read it and it's like, oh, God was faithful to His promise. You know what I'm saying? So most people say, oh, in Joshua it says kill people. No, that's not what it says. There are places God says, yes, you go in and kill people, animals, and you burn the city. Yes. In other places it says don't kill the people, you kill the animals. In other places you don't kill anybody. Why? Why the difference? See, people shoot their mouths sometimes, but they don't do their homework. The difference is because God was showing them, it's a historical box. God was showing them that He is holy and they must obey His commandments. When you get to the Psalms, you don't read the Psalms to throw the spears. It's a totally different understanding. When I read the parables of Jesus, they have a historical box. In Islam, there is no historical box. Because if they put it in the historical box, then everything we learn from Muhammad stays in Muhammad days. Fine. So Muhammad used jihad in 7th century Arabia. Great. Good job. What do we do now? So the Shia and the Sunnis are struggling. The largest Shia country is Iran. They strike oil. So all this oil wealth is going to the Shiite. The Sunnis are in Saudi Arabia. They strike oil. Now they have oil, pushing Sunni Islam. These two are trying on a race. Who will win? Now, will there be a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia? I hope not, but for me, it's very possible. 4 years ago, I was in the Arabian Gulf, and the Iranian army, the Iranian Navy was doing maneuvers, sea to land missiles. Their missiles will go farther than the width of the Arabian Gulf. So, I'll leave it here. Is that good? Shia and Sunni. Sunnis will understand the sacrifice of Jesus because of Adha. There's a book out as you leave called Adha in the Injil. Shiite will understand sacrifice because of the death of Ali and death of Hassan Hussein. They always say, I wish we were born earlier to redeem. So they understand the concept of redemption. Okay? So don't be ashamed or afraid to share the concept of redemption. All right, I'm off 3 minutes and 40 seconds. We took too much time. Thank you for your time. Shall we pray? This has been a great conference for us. And let's stand together. And would you like to end our time in prayer, Chris? And let's pray that God will use the student body to really reach across the neighborhood here, especially like Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Tulsa with the Muslims.
Okay, let's pray. Father in heaven, we're so grateful to you for the things that you are now doing in our world. We're so thankful that we have the message of truth of Jesus, and I pray that you would give us boldness and courage to speak. I thank you for my brother Fouad, who's been here with us. I pray that you'd bless his ministry. I pray that you'd open many doors for him to go through and to help your church understand more clearly your message for Muslims today. And we pray for the Muslims right around us here in Joplin and in Pittsburgh and nearby. We pray, Lord, that you would lead us in these matters, that we might have hearts that love and also mouths that speak concerning your greatness. Lord, we thank you for the day, and we pray your blessing on it, and we pray these things, Jesus, in your name. Amen. Amen.